Hello everyone, welcome to our discussions on global manufacturing and industrialisation. I'm Declan Curry, I'm a journalist and broadcaster. You can take part in our conversations on social media. The hashtag is GMIS2020 and you can find us on Twitter or Instagram at GMI Summit. This session is Energies of the Future. The time for clean energy is now. The slowdown in the world economy under coronavirus has affected the development of new forms of clean energy for the future. As we rebuild economies after the pandemic, many economists argue that we should use stimulus schemes to develop a more sustainable future and to encourage industry to use new technology to remove carbon from their operations. Many nations have commitments to move towards a carbon neutral future and have significant reductions in place. Well, I'm delighted to welcome to our discussion the Minister of Energy and Infrastructure at the UAE, His Excellency Suhail Mohamed Faraj Al Mazuri. Minister, Your Excellency, thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
Do you expect that these carbon reduction plans that I described will remain in place? Is the pandemic a warning of what is to come if we continue to delay concrete action on climate change?
Well, first of all, it's a great pleasure to join you at these televised sessions. And for us in the United Arab Emirates, we believe in long-term planning. To handle something like climate change or something like reducing CO2 emissions, you need to look at it from all angles, and you need to come up with a long-term plan. And that's what we did in 2017. We looked at our options in terms of energy sources, and we looked at the targets and how can we make our cities one of the best livable cities in the future. And we elect to go for a rather longer term strategy than the usual. Usually people go 2030, 2040, and we elected to go a little bit further than that and to look at 2050. And it was a quite transformational, the results that we got, which ended to be our strategy. So we're moving from 100% relying on gas, which is, by the way, the cleanest fossil fuel, to become a almost 50% fossil, 50% green forms of energy. And out of those green forms of energy, we found that solar is going to be the dominant contributor with at least 44% contribution in the energy mix. And that will lead to three major things. One, we will reduce the CO2 emissions if we do that by 70%, 70. And that's quite a great target to have. Second, we need also to change the way we consume energy. And that starts with the demand side management, that starts with changing the codes of buildings and moving gradually to the smart cities utilizing the fourth industrial revolution technologies. The third target that we are trying to achieve is also to achieve a financial reward. And the financial rewards that was estimated, we will be saving around $190 billion versus going with gas. So green does not mean only it's going to achieve the environmental targets, but it's also going to save us more than $190 billion. And that's assuming, of course, the cost of gas versus the vision that we had in the reduction cost of renewable energy. Of course, nuclear is also a component in our strategy, and now we have on stream in the testing period one of our 4 reactors, nuclear reactors, as part of our peaceful nuclear energy program. But down the road, we will have the other 3 joining, and hopefully by then we will have around 24% of our energy in that year once they are ready from a green form of energy. So
And
it's a strategy, you need to look at it in a longer term.
And that is your strategy, sir. Does climate change remain an important priority as we also try to deal with coronavirus? Is it as important as it always was?
I think it's even more important because now the concern is not economical anymore. People are looking at their health and looking at the environmental aspects. Those are a contributor to better health. And we're targeting a cleaner cities in terms of CO2 emission. So that also going to have the people living in those cities healthier people. So I think now living through the pandemic makes us more concerned about the quality of air, the quality of health, and the status of health that our people need to have in the future.
And you mentioned the important role that will be played by fourth industrial revolution technologies. How do you see those being deployed, being developed to help business, industry, and society become more sustainable?
It's a chain. If you want to reduce less or to consume less energy, that means you need to maximize your efficiency or optimize your efficiency. And how would you optimize the efficiency of our consumption without the help of the machine or the artificial intelligence or the Internet of Things or the robotics? And we need also to look at digitizing our electrical systems to be able to smooth in the peaks that we have during the summer. So all of those technologies that comes with the fourth industrial revolution, like the Internet of Things, the AI, the robotics, and digitization, they are going to be the tools to achieve the reduction, the 40% reduction that I mentioned earlier as part of our strategy. So we are in the process now toward smarter cities and smarter infrastructure in the United Arab Emirates. Therefore, the investment and the deployment of such technologies is quite important and part of our journey.
And of course, sir, given the nature of the UAE economy, of particular importance is the use of these technologies in the oil and gas industries, where I imagine this development is now taking place.
You're absolutely right. Our national oil company, ADNOC, is pioneering actually in deploying some of those technologies. And we have seen remarkable results once we start deploying them. We started with our control room in ADNOC that is run by AI. And we have seen, looking at the whole value chain in one screen, how much optimization we can do. And we have conducted some of those suggestions, and we have seen great results out of that. Not to mention the use of robotics in the oil fields and some of the unmanned islands, not to mention the reduction in the maintenance activities using the drones and some other technologies as well. So absolutely right. The national oil companies are a bit of beneficiaries of those technologies, and they were the first to use them.
How important is it, sir, that there is international activity, that nations cooperate whilst facing this challenge?
Well, it's very important. We are now living through this pandemic. We learned that we need to be connected, at least on the measures, at least on the the R&D when it comes to approving some of the vaccines, speeding up the process in certain areas. So definitely we need to cooperate as nations. And also, it's important in the energy field that we look at optimizing our grid. If we interconnect with each other, that means better optimization of the grid. That means less redundancy in the sparing that every country is trying to build. We have tried that in the GCC and connecting us together, and we have seen huge benefits. And now we are considering to expand it to the Arab world, where we connect with Egypt, we connect with Iraq, with Jordan, and with other countries as well. So connectivity and looking at optimization on a global level is the way forward for the future if we are serious in tackling some of the pressing environmental issues.
And in many cases, sir, there will be the need for some nations to show leadership and for nations to work together in partnership.
Yes, definitely. And I think we are trying to give, in the UAE, we are trying to give an example. We were the first to try certain things, and they worked. Others have started to follow our steps. And this is start from the leadership, because you need to have at the highest level a willing to trust and the new change, and testing new envelopes every now and then, and that support, without our leadership we will not be able to do it, because those are transformational sometimes, and it's not easy to decide that I will go 50% green and you are an oil and gas producer. So it takes true leadership to decide that and go ahead and do it.
And as you said earlier in our discussion, it also involves looking at the entire process of production and consumption. You cannot look at one end of that supply chain without looking at the other end as well.
Definitely. And you need also the consumers and the customers to be working with you in achieving that target. You cannot just, as a regulator or as a government, force people to do things that are not convincing. So they need to be convinced. And once you have a long-term strategy and you have your people are convinced, they're working with you, and your neighbors as well, then the benefit becomes greater.
What is the role for international organizations such as UNIDO, which of course is heavily involved with our discussions over this weekend, and global initiatives such as GMIS? What part do they play?
I think first of all, the SDG goals are embedded in every country's strategy. So everyone is targeting to achieve those goals as a sustainable development. And we cannot do it in isolation. So we need some platform like the United Nations or UNIDO to start implementing and promoting those changes. Some of the countries, they are lagging behind. Others are very advanced. But the idea of GMIS or GMIS is to ensure that no one is left behind. The idea of GMIS, when we started it as United Arab Emirates together with UNIDO, is to avoid what happened in the third industrial revolution, when some of the countries were left behind. And then we ended up nowadays trying to tackle some of those challenges that those countries are facing with. Environmental challenges are universal. So you cannot blame a country if you left it without help later on for the pollution that they are doing, because you did not teach them or work with them or help them to catch up. So the idea from GMIS is try to connect, try to help as much as possible. And help does not mean always a financial help. Help means sometimes show me your best learnings and best lessons, and then that connectivity, that interaction cannot be done with governments alone without the private sector. So GMIS is bringing the private sector as a financiers, as companies to those countries in trying to come up with a win-win game where they excel in their SDG goals. At the same time, they also benefit from the fourth industrial revolution. And UAE suggested this idea. We worked with UNIDO. The relationship has been great. And we had a session here in Abu Dhabi where we launched the Abu Dhabi initiative, and it has been endorsed and successful. So we look forward truly to help and to share learnings through UNIDO with the rest of the world.
We've mentioned the impact of the pandemic on the world economy. As the world economy recovers, it's certain that demand for energy will increase again. How do energy providers and energy companies ensure that that demand for additional energy is satisfied, yet we stay on this path towards a more sustainable economic model for the future?
Well, first of all, we need, you're right, the population of the world is expanding and the resources are the same. So we need to innovate in those greener, renewable forms of energy, like solar, like hydro and others, and wind and others. And we need to promote them to become a part of the solution in the future. But as we know, they are not available to every nation. And sometimes they are not also reliable alone. So they would need a complementing or a base load. And therefore, we need to continue investing in the fossil fuel as well, because the demand is going to increase and because this is a finite resources and it got depleted in many countries. We need, through platforms like OPEC or OPEC Plus, to ensure that investments in the fossil fuel is there and is supported. That doesn't mean that we will forget the other complementing factor or the other most growing factor contributor, which is the greener forms of energy. They are the future, and we need to invest in them. And we have done remarkable here in UAE in reducing the cost. I mean, I remember 7 years ago, the cost of electricity, the solar, was 6 probably cent. Now we are at 1.35 cent per kilowatt hour. So it's amazing what the world have done in terms of technology and reducing this cost. So it's almost free energy now. So this has been instrumental in promoting the renewable energy in many nations that were not considering in the past.
When we look at the major energy companies, at the moment they are dealing with the fall in oil prices globally at a point when they were trying to become greener, trying to transform the nature of their business, which is an extremely expensive thing to do. What is your thought on how the big energy companies can be helped to survive their current financial issues and still maintain their momentum of transformation?
Well, they need, I think, to focus on energy rather than a form of energy that they are in. So you see now some of the IOCs, they were a pure oil and gas companies. And nowadays you see them starting to invest in renewable energies, starting to invest even in the technology, not only in the projects. So I think this diversification that is happening at those large energy or large oil and gas companies becoming large energy companies, I think this has been helpful. We can help them by providing them access to the projects. And here in the UAE, we tend to do projects with partnership rather than government doing these projects. So we tend to tender all of our energy projects, whether they are solar or CCGT, gas-powered power plants, to investors, and those investors comes up with the highest efficiency technologies and continue reducing the prices. And I will see, I'm sure that I will see some of the typical oil and gas companies winning contracts as in solar or in wind or in other forms of energy.
When we look to the long-term future and we consider how we have a sustainable economy in the future, the argument is often made that what we need is a circular economy and a circular carbon economy. How does this inform your decision making and your thinking?
It's part of the plan. When we did our strategy, we looked at how do we reuse some of the energy sources that we have, how do we recycle, and how do we reduce emissions and CO2. So the circular economy is about those concepts. So you need to consume wisely. You need to consume definitely less. So that's why the 40% reduction in per capita consumption comes. You need to reduce CO2 emission. That's why the 70% came. And you need to recycle. We need to be smart in how do we consume energy. I don't think continuing with our habits as we are today will cause us way bigger problems in the future. So the target here is to change the behavior of the human through the technology or the use of the technology in terms of the codes of building, in terms of the efficiencies, and sometimes in terms of prices. Sometimes you need to make it painful for the people to abuse the system in their consumption.
When we look at how the nations of the world responded to coronavirus, we saw nations act to protect their populations from a greater risk, from a natural risk. There are parallels, there are similarities between that and the discussions on climate change. What lessons should we learn from how we responded to coronavirus when we think about what we must do in the future on climate?
Well, first of all, the first lesson is the center of the attention should be the human capital. So we need to look at the human. They are the consumers, so they need to be feeling safe and they need to be feeling comfortable. And in the cities of the future, if we fail to make the cities livable in terms of the carbon or the quality of the air, then we will fail in achieving that target. And I think what we learned from this pandemic is that your health is more important than anything else as a human and as a citizen and as a customer. So that focus, we're fortunate here that here in the Emirates, that is quite the focus, because if we are only looking at the commercial elements, our choices would be different. And we elected to become one of the cleanest cities in the world by 2050 for that quiet purpose, is focusing on the individual. As a matter of fact, when we put those elements that we judge which form of energy do we go to, we ended up with 4 elements. One of them was achieving inhabitant happiness. So if you are not happy in the city, we failed. And that is as important as the commercial and as important as the environmental impact in terms of weighting. So we believe that the learning from this pandemic is we need, first of all, to focus on the human capital. Second, we need to look at the full value chain, including the sparing philosophy and everything, in the case of a disruption in the value chain. And that was not something that the world was looking at. You would assume that you will have a problem in one part of the world. but not in every continent in the world. And I think those are things that that makes you rethink of how you use your resources, and how you ensure that you have always a spare capacity. But you cannot work alone. You can work alone and try to be, in the worst case scenario, ready. But the way to do it is to connect with the rest of the world, connect with them electricity wise, connect with them through a gas pipeline grid, especially with our neighbors. So there are many areas that we can complement each other.
Is this a wake-up call?
I think it was. I think it is actually. It is a wake-up call to think differently. I mean, we were thinking as of prioritizing the problems as they will not happen at the same time, and no one was. We talked about a pandemic, and there are lots of movies about the pandemic, but no one was thinking, if it happens, how are we going to react? And I can tell you, as United Arab Emirates, from the leadership to the people, we have done well, remarkably well in dealing with it. We concentrated on the people in terms of number of testing. We have done more than any other country in terms of testing the people, and we have maintained one of the lowest fatality rates, and we have looked at it as a whole nation, not only as an authority. So that has been a success story, I think, and many countries can learn from that story.
Your Excellency, thank you very much. We say thank you to the Minister for Energy and Infrastructure at the UAE. We thank you for your attention, for being part of our discussion as well, and we invite you to continue the debate on social media. We are at GMI Summit, and the hashtag is GMIS 2020. Keep watching for further insights from around the world here at GMIS 20.